Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to talk about our total lunar eclipse that is happening this Sunday, May 15th, into Monday, May 16th. So, depending on where you are in the world, it will either be on the 15th or 16th. Here in Hawaii, it's going to be from 3:32 p.m. to 8:50 p.m. on May 15th, so entirely on the 15th. And in that span of time, the first part of it, it won't be nighttime. It won't be dark, so we won't be able to see it. The moon will be beneath the horizon. In the second half of the eclipse, we will be able to see it here. If you move 3 hours later to Pacific time, we have that span being from 6:32 to 11:50 p.m. So just before the 16th begins. So people on Pacific time zone will likely be able to see the majority of the eclipse, right? Only a little bit of it will still be before sunset. And it will also entirely happen on the 15th. Then, of course, you move east from there and it'll start to be more on the 16th and later in the early morning hours. So some people might have to stay up a little bit later in order to catch it. This particular eclipse is in sidereal Scorpio. It's at the very, very early degrees of that. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. We have it at 108, which happens to be a magical number in the Vedic system. It's the sacred number of moons from the moon to the earth and suns from the sun to the earth. And it's like a number of life. So when we move out of that number, we will be moving away from our sacred existence here on earth that is so carefully calculated by that distance. So a lot of people know 108 as a sacred number. Maybe there's 108 beads on a mala, or maybe you have participated in 108 sun salutations before. But the science behind that number has to do with the number of the diameter of the moon, how many of those there are between the moon and the moon and the earth, and the diameter of the sun, how many of those there are between the earth and the sun. And that's that divine number. And we're actually moving out of it already. I think we're at 109 almost for one of those two calculations last time I checked. So getting into a deeper conversation than I was planning on here, but I did note that the degrees were at 108. So this particular lunar eclipse is happening so early in Scorpio that the moon actually is most of the time going to be in Libra. The max point of the eclipse is 6:11, and we can see it's 6:15 p.m. is the time the moon and the sun are directly across from each other. So even 1 hour earlier, and this is Hawaii time, but even 1 hour earlier, which is 5:15, the moon is in Libra still, which is where the node that's eclipsing, the south node, is. And so we see that this is still giving us perspective, or an experience that will give us perspective from this Libra Aries axis that the nodes have moved into, right? They were in the Taurus Scorpio axis and the nodes moved backwards. So now they're in this Libra Aries axis, and we had our solar eclipse in Aries 2 weeks ago. This is important to understand, that the nodes move backwards, because the nodes have a lot to do with our karma. Rahu, the north node, is where we're starting new karma. Ketu, the south node, is where we're finishing karma, where we're ending karma. And of course, when it's transitory like this, where we're all experiencing it collectively together, it's not in our particular natal chart, we're all experiencing this closing of karma and opening of karma together. It doesn't mean we've never been in this placement before. Of course we have. The nodes change axis every 1.5 years. So every 18 years, they return to the same place. So 18 years ago, we might have had the same experience of Rahu being in Aries and Ketu being in Libra. And there was a different level of that karma that we were starting and finishing collectively, right? And also individually in our own charts. This is a different house for each of us. And if you don't know what house this axis is, and you don't know anything about this this alignment yet. I have a report that sends out from my newsletter when you sign up for my newsletter that gives you what this axis is doing in your chart for all 12 rising signs. So all of the Vedic rising signs have an opportunity to see what house is activated for them. This is really important when you're understanding transits. It's not just a sign that people have sort of, whatever their obsession is with each of the different zodiac signs. It's a place in your chart. It's a house, and it's an area of your life that is being activated. And it's very important to understand which area of your life is being activated. So in this case, we have our moon being eclipsed at this very early degree of Vishaka in Scorpio. And like I said, he's traveling from Libra, and Vishaka is a star that bridges Libra and Scorpio. So it begins in Libra and goes into Scorpio. And it's a star of finding your own path, finding your way. It's actually the forked path. So you have to choose, right? You have to pick a way to go. And being as it's the end of Libra, moving into Scorpio, it really shows a lot about how we are learning to step away from the crowd, or step away from people pleasing, step away from our compromise, and find our own way, and the hard work and the sacrifice that's necessary if we want to get where we want to go. And it also has a lot to do with something higher than oneself. It is ruled by Jupiter, and that is the planet of wisdom and beliefs and higher truths. And it's also ruled by Indra Agni, which is kind of a conglomeration of two of the Vedic deities that are most well known. Indra is the king of the gods. He's the one who bears the lightning bolt and gets, his courage is one of the things he's renowned for, but also sometimes his courage is so much that he ends up getting into different challenges and having to get himself out of those challenges again. A lot of those tales happen later. They happen in the Puranic texts. Indra starts to take on more and more of a sort of like foolish demeanor or cocky demeanor in the later texts. But ultimately, what he's really showing is a quality of sacrifice, right? A king, the king of the gods of all the kings that there can be, is the highest king. And a king in his best is in sacrifice, right? He's not getting overly egoic and caught up in the trappings of his royalty. A king is ultimately, and really not just a king, right? The boss of any business, the director of a play or a movie, that anyone who's taking that head role is the one who's going to be expected to do the most work and going to have to show up the most. And when everyone else quits because they can, because it's not their thing, that person's the one left holding everything else, or the mess, if nothing was formed. So that quality is very sacrificial. And Agni is fire. He's the god of fire. And so with this nakshatra, we see there's a sacrificial fire. It's a fire of work and effort and energy and tapasya, the concept of burning energy, burning fire in sacrifice to something, or in offering. So not just for yourself, not just for, I want to get this boon, or I want to get this, this thing for myself, this city, this power, or this, in our world, material possession we want to get, or relationship we want to attain, or whatever it is that we seek. It's something that we're doing for more purification purposes, and really for God, or for whatever your concept of God allows for, whether that's energy or love, or a specific form of a deity. However, your connection to sources, it's an offering to source, and it's fueled by work, by effort, by doing something, and usually continuous in the form of like a sadhana, a daily practice that you would do. So this effort, this ongoing effort, gets us to a certain place. And in Vishaka, we see that the results come late. It's where we manifest late in life. And there's a triumphant archway as one of the symbols. There's a lotus at the end of the finish line. There's a potter's wheel, that sort of painstaking, time-consuming thing that requires patience, right? It requires effort, and it requires putting one foot in front of the other, and it requires patience. So this is a lot of what the star has to do with. In the Libra part of it, it's that, which path am I taking? Which way am I going? Am I walking the final way home? In the Scorpio part of it, this is where the moon is actually debilitated. The moon is in its lowest state of intelligence in these first 3 degrees of Scorpio in the star of Vishaka. And the reason that it gets debilitated specifically in Scorpio is because Scorpio is where we're a bit dramatic, right? And most people love full moon eclipses in Scorpio. This is the, the time everybody gets excited, all the passion around that particular sign comes out. But the truth of the matter is that the moon in Scorpio is at its most unstable. It's at its most sort of emotionally controlling and volatile, and really having to face a lot of fears that may or may not be real. So a lot of imagined fears come up in Scorpio. And the moon being our mind and our emotions and our innermost self, it's the part of us that can really get caught in that loop, right? There's nothing to sort of regulate and tell us what reality is. So we're in this cycle of following our fears, which can get very dramatic. So that's one thing to think about. It's just that the moon in and of itself is in its very hardest, most difficult placement here. And our emotions might be high. We might be seeing things different than they are, and also trying to control things and control the outcome of things. That's one of the things in Scorpio, is this sort of, strike first so that you don't get struck. There's a real vulnerability in Scorpio. It is a water sign and it is emotion based. And it's also an insect. So it's very aware of the fact that it could be stomped. No matter how much pain a scorpion's bite would ever give you, you could easily put your shoe on it and it would die. So that constant awareness of vulnerability and the lash first, out of a place of fear is our big common themes in Scorpio. And we can see that with our mind and our emotions that can be challenging. Well, the South Node is this place where we're really pulling away, while wherever the North Node is, wherever Rahu is a place that we're very excited about and very, very much want, but we don't have a lot of expertise or knowledge. Where the South Node is, we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of wisdom, we have all this past life experience that we've accrued over time, but we have no head to engage. The nodes are split, and in the mythology, Rahu is just a head with a mouth and nothing to sort of assimilate the experiences it's eating. Ketu is just the neck down to the tail. So it's all that digested information, but no head to engage, nothing bringing you more of that in this life. But of course, whatever this axis is, we do have something we need to complete where Ketu is, or else that new karma can't properly open up on the front end. And so this Ketu has this way of not looking and not wanting to see whatever that area of life is for you, really. It's Libra themes of compromise and, harmonizing and really doing anything you can to work with other people, right? The North End is in Aries, where we're just like, this is my selfish desire. This is what I want to do. This is my trajectory. And I've got blinders on, as to how that affects anybody else. Libra is where you're hyper aware of everybody else and how everything affects them, to the point where you almost are incapable of moving forward in your own way, which is why Vishaka is so important, because it's where we stop sort of, the 3 different stars of Libra sort of show this pathway. And in Swati, the one in the middle, we're trying to learn how to individuate ourselves and to also, realize what are we fighting against? Is it all just illusions in our head? And then in Vishaka, we really are being asked to pick a path and go with it, regardless of what everyone else is doing. And that's a big problem with Libra. With people who have a lot of energy or a lot of planets in Libra, they tend to vacillate a lot because they are so concerned. They're less concerned with what they're doing and more concerned with what everyone else is doing and how that will affect everyone else and how will it affect the group, and will the group be able to harmonize once that choice is made. Every time a choice is made, it's like everybody else has to shift. Well, the Libra person's very aware of that. The Aries person's the opposite. It's the one just making the choice and going and making everyone else shift around them. So this is the primary axis that our eclipses are going to be on for the next 1.5 years. So again, like this full moon actually ends up in Scorpio, which, is going to make people who like Western astrology happy. it is really still kind of a Libra issue that we're dealing with here. And it's going to be the issue for the next year and a half. So it's very important to understand what we're pulling away from. What we're not wanting to do is negotiate, compromise, work with others, harmonize. What we're wanting to do is like my own thing, you know, whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. And I don't care how it affects other people. And so this eclipse point being here in Libra is showing that there's a part of that that we really need to look back at. Like maybe if you have been an overly compromising person in your life, it might feel really good to put your energy towards your own selfish desires and not pay as much attention to everyone else. But there's still something there that needs, you can't just do that, right? Nothing on earth has ever been done by oneself. Whatever people think they've done on their own, they have not. There have been so many contributions prior to that moment that that person is standing on, whether they realize it or not. You know, whether you're a scientist in a lab by yourself, you know, back in the olden days when that existed, or whether you're, you know, a famous musician or an artist or a tortured person who's been, you know, writing poetry in a room by yourself for however long, and you really think it all just came from you. You read books before that. You had to learn how to read somehow. You read something before that. You had experiences with other people before that. Somehow you were able to feed yourself, clothe yourself, house yourself. Not one of us on earth got here alone. We all had at minimum somebody birth us and tend our needs enough to get us to a stage where we were able to care for ourselves on our own. And even if those experiences were horrific and horrible and we feel alone and victimized as a result of that, we still even have that pain and suffering because of others. And that pain and suffering might be the fodder for whatever brilliant book we write or whatever song we sing. So at the end of the day, there is no such thing as doing it yourself. It doesn't exist. So if we ignore everyone else's needs, we have nothing. We have built nothing. We have done nothing. We have written nothing. Even just thinking about the fact that writing a brilliant song or writing an amazing piece of poetry or whatever it is you want to do, other people have to enjoy that, or else it's what, you know, lots of people have journals full of poetry or, you know, songs they sing to themselves in the shower. But if there's nobody listening, then it really takes away quite a lot of what that contribution is, even to society or to your own soul or to, you know, or to just the experience you had of getting to create that. So this is the big lesson we're really going to be focusing on. And this is bringing that back to us because, like I said, the moon is going to be in Libra most of the time. So it's really just going to be that hour before the max point of the eclipse. So 5:15-ish Hawaii time, which is 8:15 Pacific time. That is going to be when it shifts into the Scorpio part. And that's when the illusions start coming up. And that's when the fear starts coming up and the facing the fear and all this kind of stuff where we have to really look at our projections and look at what triggers us and why. And often we don't in Scorpio. Often we just allow ourselves to be triggered and react from that place. With K2, we might not be paying a lot of attention, especially because the moon's going to pass exact degrees of K2 right before this. So it'll be like, we're not really paying attention. We're not really paying attention. And then suddenly we get triggered. And K2 is very erratic for that reason. The erraticism comes from the fact that we're not paying attention. And then all of a sudden it fucking pierces, pardon my French, it pierces down to the core of whatever the issue is for you. And you implode, or it implodes, the issue implodes. So whatever area of your life this is in for you, it's going to be the majority of that time where K2 is in Libra. That's kind of the focus. And then the moment of actual eclipsing, or at least the high point of the eclipsing, because the eclipse itself, of course, starts a couple hours prior when the moon is still in Libra. We'll have that experience where it's like, it can feel very sudden, you know, and very sharp and cutting. And part of that is because nothing eased us into it. There was nothing easing us into it. And it's not that it didn't ease in, because if you think of like a sharp pointed object going deep down into something, which is really kind of what K2 is, that deep plunge, there was all that time before then. It's just that you weren't paying attention to it because you had no head to engage. And you're just like, oh yeah, I've done this before, been here, done that, not interested, boom, hits that trigger point. Now you're interested, but you're actually irate or you know, explosive. So this is the way that works. And so it's a good time to really take care of yourself, really take care of your emotions, your vulnerabilities, allow yourself to be surrounded by people that probably won't trigger you as much, or doing practices. Generally speaking, during eclipses, it's nice if you don't go outside and bathe under the light of the moon. That's difficult because people like to see them. They're pretty cool. But whatever you're doing, things like chanting or singing, things like meditating, praying can be very healing in these times. Also, surrounding yourself with elements that are healing. Libra is an air sign. Scorpio is a water sign. Being around those elements can be healing for you. There's a fiery quality as well to this. I don't know, increasing that fire isn't necessarily what you need, but again, the god of this star, this sort of two gods, but the way it's written in the Vedas is that this is one aspect of Agni. One aspect of fire is Indra Agni, and it's that sacrificial fire. So having the fire there, in a sacrificial way or in a ceremonious way can be very positive. Might not want to be super hot, you might not want to be in a landscape that's particularly hot because that can agitate you, but being in the company of a fire and with having the capacity to burn things or purify your desires or purify your projections could be helpful. And really just being careful about who you're around, and what kind of environments you're around in this time, because not only do you experience this in whatever area of your life this is for you, but you have to remember everybody else is experiencing it too. And that does mean your partner or your best friend or, your roommates or your landlords or whoever else you have around you. It does mean the person who works in the store that's helping you. And it means the person on social media who's going to get in like a really long debate with you about something. And it also means that people who are already very unstable are going to be having an even harder time, right? So if you live in an area where there's a lot of people, or city or kind of environment where there's a lot of people who might even live on the streets or have drug problems kind of walking around, or stuff like that, there's a sensitivity to be aware of, that people who are already suffer in sort of a delusional state to begin with can be extra affected by all eclipses, but especially one in Scorpio. And one with that kind of Ketu quality. There's much more anger where Ketu is. Ketu is where we're disgusted. Rahu, we're excited. We're like a new puppy or something. We just want to try. Oh, can I have that experience? Can I have that experience? Can I have that experience? Oh, I chewed up the couch again. Whoops. It's that kind of new energy. The Ketu end is where we're kind of disgusted and like, I don't want that thing, and there's this sort of, repulsed air about it, and a real lack of compassion can occur. So being aware of that with yourself and also with others is I guess the message I'm trying to send there. So the good news about this, I'll talk about Mercury retrograde in 1 second, but the good news about this is that the planet that rules Libra, which again is not where the moon actually is going to be. The moon's going to be in Scorpio, but let's talk about something positive for a moment. The planet that rules Libra is Venus, and Venus is in her exalted state here in Pisces, and she's moving towards exact degrees of exaltation. So closer and closer to a point that really brings out the part of us that has the highest understanding of love and relationships. The part of us that understands that giving to one person and expecting to receive immediately back from that one person is not really love. And that while we do need to have exchange in our relations with people, it's not the same kind of love as the moon offers, which is unconditional, like a mother towards a child. This is relational love, but it's relational love that understands that happiness is more, it's increased when we're not taking score. And when instead we're choosing to be happy anyway, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of what this person did or what this person did or why this happened like this. It's an acceptance of the fact that we actually don't know what will make us happy. At the end of the day, what Pisces teaches us more than even Sagittarius, Jupiter's other sign, is that we don't know. We need to have some kind of faith, because ultimately all that workings and willfulness that we have in this life, thinking we're going to achieve happiness somehow, whether it's by getting that particular partner, or achieving that success in our career, or whatever it is we think will make us happy, at the end of the day, getting it isn't necessarily a guarantee of happiness. In fact, a lot of times it is not a guarantee of happiness. What we find out when we get what we wanted is that happiness doesn't come from that. It doesn't come from another person giving us something, right? Happiness comes from inside. And the highest form of happiness is acceptance, acceptance of what is, because it isn't going to change. We can change little shifts in our own life. We can certainly change quite a lot of our own self. We can change our own patterns, our own habits, our own beliefs, our own practices, our own activities. We can do a lot around what we can change, but there's only so much we can shift in the outside world. And so much of Venus energy is spent with others, trying to get something from others, happiness. And how do we get it? Well, maybe if I give a little bit of this, I'll get some happiness back. Maybe if I give a little of this, I'll get some happiness back. Well, in Pisces, we understand that that's just not true. And that, yes, compromise is necessary and important if we want to get along with people and have people in our lives, but we're compromising out of a state of okayness with ourselves, not lack. It's not like I lack this thing so I'm going to give you it so that you give it back to me. Where there's this sort of immediate exchange, this idea that if I give to you, you're going to give back to me, which is okay. I mean, there's an okayness with that. I mean, Venus is like that in her own sign of Libra. There's that quality of I give, you take, I give, like giving back and forth. But when it's in this exalted state, we're really beyond that. And we understand that ultimately that give and take has a lot of limitations on it. And that at some point, somebody's going to need to take a lot more than they can give. And that's going to be okay with you, because your happiness is not founded on how much happiness someone else doles out to you. Your happiness is internal and has to do with your relationship to God. And also, if you think of romantic relationships, a truly high romantic relationship and even sexual union would have to have God in it. It would have to have a relationship with something higher. It can't just be between two bodies or two people who are trying to live life together. The mundane can never raise up to the sacred, right? Unless it's recognized as the sacred that it is. So if we keep things in the sort of mundane world and we refuse to allow them to be sacred, then they'll remain mundane. You'll continue to have your dinner partner every Friday night or whatever, but you'll never have that high level of completely transformative relationship that is available. So this is Venus in Pisces, and that will be coloring the quality of this eclipse, because like I said, the moon's going to be in Libra for a long portion of the time up until that max point of the eclipse. And also because the south node is there. And we can see at the exact moment of the eclipse, when the sun and the moon are across from each other, our rising sign is even in Libra. And it's actually been in Libra for a good hour and probably like 45 minutes at this point, maybe hour and a half. So the focus, the energy of this period and this time that the eclipse is happening will have this blessing of an exalted Venus. And of course, Jupiter is joined also, and Jupiter's in his own sign of Pisces. So he's in very strong dignity as well, giving us expansion and optimism and hope and inspiration and strong beliefs, strong maybe even practices or spiritual beliefs that help us attain and achieve this higher state. So we're not stuck in the projections and pain and suffering quality. So there's a lot of beauty running there with this Jupiter and Venus in Pisces. The ruler of Scorpio is Mars, where the moon actually will be. And Mars is in a less exciting position in Aquarius. At the very end of Aquarius, we can see joined Saturn, who's at the very beginning. So the good thing is that they're very far apart. Saturn's not even at 1 degree, and Mars is already in the last degree of the sign. So they're far from each other. The reason I say that's good is because Saturn and Mars don't really get along very well. Mars is where we fight. Saturn is where we flight. It's where we are fearful. And in this case, Saturn's in his own sign of Aquarius, and Mars is in less positive dignity. And certainly one of the main things about Mars being in Aquarius is that it can really rile us up about social issues. It will, of course, depend on what Aquarius is in your chart. And if you don't know that, one of the other reports that's sending out with my newsletter right now is Saturn and Aquarius for all 12 signs. So you could find out by signing up for my email list. But Mars in Aquarius does have this quality of, sort of this social justice warrior, fighting for that which is, fighting for the little people and fighting against corruption and fighting against that sort of top-down leadership model where some person or small percentage of people have everything and everyone else is sort of, left to fend for themselves. So the Mars could be a little angry. That Mars energy can be a little bit angry, and it can allow social issues, things outside of ourselves that we don't have a lot of control over, at least in this moment. We can take little baby steps to help social issues, and we should, but ultimately, the vast amount of the control we have in any given moment is over our own reactions, our own body, our own choices, our actions, the words we say and things like that. We have much more control over ourselves than we do over big global concerns or social issues. So those social issues, though, can make us really upset and mad and can feed some of those projections that will happen with this moon, with this full moon. And the other thing that's going on is Mercury is retrograde, right? Mercury is retrograde in Taurus. And the sun has also just moved into Taurus, right? Because we're in this 108 part of the Taurus Scorpio axis with our full moon. And Mercury retrograde here in Taurus is the thing that a lot of people are most afraid of. I'm sure everything that happens on this eclipse will be attributed to Mercury retrograde because people just love to blame Mercury retrograde for everything. But at the end of the day, Mercury retrograde it's a communication stalling. It's a delay of communication. And because we live in a world where we're very cell phone happy and computer happy, and we email people and social media is a big part of our life, and we use whatever apps we use and all this stuff, it can be very frustrating. A lot of us do business using these things. And so even our own work can be really challenged. We can have a really hard time getting our own work done when Mercury is retrograde. So it's something, that in a very just mundane way can cause us mishaps, challenges, delayed communication. Well, it's in Taurus where Mercury normally does really well. Normally in Taurus, our communication is grounded. It's slow enough where people can understand us. Our desire is there to have connectivity. So we're actually wanting to communicate, not just to say things. The point is for the other person to hear us and to have some level of harmony in that. We tend to have sweet speech or kind words or nicer ways of saying things, which usually gets met better. But when a planet is retrograde, those qualities sort of invert and they become super hyper aware to the person experiencing them, to the native experiencing them. But they don't manifest as much. So it's like you have these nice words you mean to say inside of yourself, but then they just don't come out, or they come out way too late. And so the niceness gets hurt by the fact that there was a delay. So it's something to just, again, be sensitive with yourself about. Very similar to that moon, be sensitive to yourself about the fact that, that you might be touchy and others might be touchy also, and that's okay. It's a time when we have a really strong capacity to review, to look over a second time, to give that, glance through one extra edit, just in case we missed something. So if you do have things you need to get out in the world, which inevitably you will in the next 3 weeks, you can, you can just take a little extra time and be okay in that way. As far as what will interest you, it's going to be things that are old. You can see old communications with partners because Taurus is ruled by Venus. You can see, maybe just with friends as well, anybody that you have sort of a loving or kind relationship with. But Taurus does have to do also with sensuality and pleasure and things like that. So you can see the past coming in. That's another quality of retrograde. Reviewing, researching, going deeper into something. that you might have started a while ago and now you're going back to it, or something that you thought you finished that you need to go back and rewind over. Doing things like mantra or singing and stuff like that can also be really healing. Working on creative works, there's a very strong creative energy with Venus. So anything that really allows you to express yourself in a way where the result isn't super important, where you're not trying to meet a deadline or publish your book this week or something like that, but you're just wanting to express in any way you can and really dive deep with those feelings, not making a lot of, strong commitments, but just allowing yourself to explore what is, can be a really healthy way of using this Mercury retrograde. Of course, the delays will also cause issues with our moon and projections and fears and all those things. And not just because that's part of what happens, is that the different miscommunications you have or delays in communications cause you to have projections and fears. But also because Mercury, you can see, is right across from that moon. So they're going to be giving each other drishti. The sun is always across from the moon in a full moon, and Mercury is joined. The other thing is that Mercury is combust. So Mercury is very close to the sun. And when the sun is close to Mercury and it's retrograde, it becomes very powerful. Mercury becomes a very powerful planet. And that's because it's so close to the sun, right? It's one of the inner planets between us and the sun. So that quality of retrograde and being close to the sun will really prominent our communication. And the fact that it's in Taurus will help us a lot because there is that grounded, earthy, friendly quality. But again, just the retrograde-ness of it means that won't always manifest. It won't always come out. And just even the delay itself could be deemed unfriendly. And also Taurus is not like Libra in the fact that it does not excessively compromise. Taurus does have a breaking point. It's like, I want everyone to get along, but if they don't, I'm still going forward, And so there's a part where that Aries energy of just moving forward on whatever your needs are, your path are, can still be continued through this Mercury. The other thing is when Mercury is combust, when it's close to the sun, what happens is we don't feel heard. That's actually what happens, is we feel like we're not being listened to. So our frustrations can come up extra from that, feeling like, usually somebody of authority, because the sun represents authority, power, something like that. So it can be that feeling of like, your father won't listen to you, or whoever's important at the head of the table isn't listening to you. And your words aren't heard. And of course, with the delay in communication, it'll really seem like your words aren't being heard. So these are other things that can just trigger us in this moment. And that's what's really most important to understand, or what are the things that can trigger us, and what can we do again on ourselves, being the only place that we can actually make immediate change to have a different experience is with ourselves. There's only so much we can change outside of ourselves. So I hope this was helpful. I know there's a lot to cover and a lot to walk through here, and I appreciate you bearing with me through it. I do have 3 reports that are sending out at the moment from my newsletter. So if you do sign up for my newsletter, and it's at the address down at the bottom there, www.radhahomeyoga.com, you will get Saturn in Aquarius for all 12 signs, Jupiter in Pisces for all 12 signs, and Rahu in Aries, K2, and Libra for all 12 signs. So those are 3 reports that are sending out because we've had these major transit shifts just over the last couple months. And so I don't do those reports except when these major shifts that are, the nodes are a 1.5 year long transit. Saturn is a 2.5 year transit, although in this case, it's like a 2.5 month transit, and then going back into Capricorn only to move forward again. And Jupiter transits for about a year. So these are big shifts that really hold us for a while and really affect us quite a bit. And, Mercury retrograde does get a lot of attention, but ultimately Saturn is going to be going retrograde just days after Mercury begins its direct motion. And Saturn can really affect us a lot more, Saturn and Jupiter, when they go retrograde, because they go retrograde for such a much longer period of time. So we are, in a way, we're never out of the woods. I feel like people often want to know, like, well, when does it get better? Or when's this, what's that point I'm waiting for? well, I want to sign my contract when Mercury retrogrades over, and these kind of things. And ultimately at the end of the day, it's like, well, when Mercury retrogrades over, then Saturn's going to be retrograde, which is the commitment, the planet of our commitment. So, whatever you're avoiding doing in Mercury retrograde might be worse in Saturn retrograde. And of course, it'll depend on your own chart and what houses and all of those things are. But we ultimately have to live by an idea that there's always going to be a challenge in front of us. And there's also always going to be a blessing. And at some points, there's going to be more blessings and less challenges. And at some points, there might be more challenges and less blessings. But one way or another, we have to continue to live. We have to continue to move through. And our enlightenment, even our highest goal, not just the mundane living, but even the highest goal we might have, still needs to be attained under those circumstances. There's not some perfect time that it will be attained better. So, we're in it, and we're always in it. And each moment we have an opportunity to evolve ourselves that much more, because that's really all we're doing. We're evolving ourselves more through it. We're not actually waiting for some better place or point in time, or some specific achievement that will then make all the troubles go away, because they won't. So you can think about that while you're meditating during this eclipse. Namaste.